The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below. Marcus Whitmore stood motionless in his corner office, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. At 45, he commanded a business empire worth $12 billion. Yet tonight he felt like the poorest man alive. The mahogany desk behind him held a single sheet of paper that had arrived 3 hours ago. The letterhead read, Metropolitan General Hospital, and the words typed below had shattered his carefully constructed world. Terminal brain tumor. 6 months. Maybe less. Marcus had built Whitmore Industries from nothing after the accident that claimed his wife Elena and their twin daughters 15 years ago. Every merger, every acquisition, every ruthless decision had been fueled by the need to stay busy, to never stop moving, to never think about what he had lost. Now time itself was his enemy. The office door remained closed, but Marcus knew his employees were still scattered throughout the building's lower floors. They worked late because he demanded it, but also because they feared him. Marcus Whitmore was legendary for his cold precision, his ability to destroy careers with a single word, his complete absence of mercy in business dealings. Fortune magazine had once called him the Ice King of Wall Street. Nobody at Whitmore Industries would dare knock on his door without an appointment. Nobody would risk his wrath by interrupting his solitude. Nobody except Amara. The soft knock came at exactly 9:15, the same time it had come every evening for the past 3 years. Marcus didn't turn around. He knew who it was, just as he knew she would enter whether he responded or not. Mr. Whitmore? Amara's voice carried the same gentle concern it always did. I brought your dinner. Marcus heard the quiet clink of china against the glass coffee table, the careful arrangement of silverware. Amara Williams moved through his office like a whisper, her presence somehow both unobtrusive and impossible to ignore. She was 28, the daughter of his housekeeper Sarah, and the only person in his life who seemed immune to his reputation. The salmon from Gabriel's, just how you like it, Amara continued, her voice closer now. Sarah made sure they included extra of that lemon sauce you enjoy. Marcus finally turned from the window. Amara stood near his desk, her dark eyes taking in the untouched papers, the half-empty Scotch glass, the medical report he had tried to hide beneath other documents. She wore a simple black dress that emphasized her natural grace, her hair pulled back in a neat bun that revealed the elegant line of her neck. You should go home, Marcus said, his voice rougher than intended. Your mother will be waiting. Amara didn't move toward the door. Instead, she studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Most people avoided eye contact with Marcus Whitmore, but Amara had never learned that particular fear. Something's wrong, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Marcus turned back to the window, hoping his reflection wouldn't betray the tremor in his hands. Nothing that concerns you. Everything about you concerns me, Mr. Whitmore. The simple honesty in her words hit him like a physical blow. For 15 years, Marcus had surrounded himself with people who wanted something from him. Business partners who sought his money, competitors who feared his influence, employees who craved his approval. Even his few remaining friends treated him like a dangerous animal that might turn on them without warning. But Amara had never wanted anything from him except his well-being. She had started working in his office part-time while finishing her business degree, initially just helping her mother with his household needs. Gradually, she had become indispensable, not because of any grand gesture, but through countless small acts of genuine care. She remembered that he preferred his coffee black in the morning, but with cream after lunch. She noticed when he forgot to eat and quietly arranged for meals to appear. She somehow always knew when he was having particularly difficult days and would find reasons to check on him more frequently. Marcus had never understood why she bothered. He paid her well, certainly, but not enough to justify the level of attention she gave to his comfort. He had asked her once, in a moment of unusual curiosity, why she chose to work for someone everyone else considered a monster. Because you're not a monster, she had replied simply. You're just hurt. The memory of that conversation made his chest tighten. Marcus gripped the window frame, his knuckles white against the dark wood. The medical report seemed to burn against the desk behind him, its words echoing in his mind. 6 months. Maybe less. Mr. Whitmore? He heard Amara's footsteps on the thick carpet, moving closer. Every instinct told him to maintain his distance, to preserve the carefully controlled atmosphere he had cultivated. But tonight, with death's shadow falling across his future, those old defenses felt pointless. "I said you should go home," he repeated, but the words lacked conviction. "And I heard you." Amara's voice was directly behind him now. "But I'm not leaving until you tell me what's happened." Marcus closed his eyes, fighting against the weakness that threatened to overwhelm him. He had faced hostile takeovers, congressional investigations, and personal tragedy with unwavering composure. He had built his reputation on being untouchable, unbreakable, utterly in control. But Amara's quiet persistence was undoing him in ways that all his previous challenges had never managed. There was something about her presence that made pretense impossible, that stripped away the elaborate armor he had constructed around his heart. "It's nothing you can fix," he said finally. "Maybe not. But that doesn't mean you have to face it alone." The gentleness in her voice was his undoing. Marcus felt his throat close, felt the careful walls he had built begin to crumble. The medical report's words crashed over him again. Aggressive tumor, inoperable, limited treatment options. All the money in the world couldn't buy him more time. For 15 years, he had told himself that he didn't mind being alone. Elena and the girls were gone, and nothing would bring them back. He had convinced himself that isolation was strength, that needing no one meant no one could hurt him again. But, standing in his office, with death approaching and only Amara's gentle concern to comfort him, Marcus realized how desperately lonely he had become. The empire he had built felt suddenly meaningless. The fear he inspired in others seemed like a hollow victory. What was the point of being powerful if you faced the end with no one who truly cared? The first tear caught him by surprise. It rolled down his cheek before he could stop it, followed by another, then another. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold window, his shoulders shaking with the force of suppressed sobs. He felt Amara's hand on his shoulder, warm and steady. She didn't speak, didn't try to force explanations from him. She simply stood there, offering her presence as an anchor in his storm of grief and terror. When Marcus finally turned around, his face wet with tears he couldn't control, Amara was ready. She had pulled a soft handkerchief from somewhere, and, without hesitation, she reached up to gently wipe his tears away. The gesture was so tender, so naturally caring, that it broke something fundamental inside him. No one had touched Marcus Whitmore with such gentle compassion since Elena's death. His employees maintained careful professional distance. His business associates treated him like a dangerous force to be managed. Even his household staff, despite their years of service, knew better than to presume familiarity. But Amara touched his face as if it were the most natural thing in the world, her fingers soft against his skin as she dried his tears. Her dark eyes held no judgment, no shock at seeing the great Marcus Whitmore reduced to weeping. There was only concern, only the desire to ease his pain however she could. "Tell me," she said softly, her hand still cupping his cheek. Marcus leaned into her touch despite himself. The human contact felt like water in a desert, desperately needed and impossibly precious. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have someone to share his burdens with, someone who cared about his well-being rather than his bank account. "I'm dying," he whispered. The words hung in the air between them, stark and final. Amara's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. If anything, her touch became more tender, more protective. "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured weakly toward his desk. "Medical report came today. Brain tumor. Terminal. 6 months if I'm lucky." Amara's breath caught, but her hand remained steady on his face. Marcus watched a dozen emotions flicker through her expression: shock, grief, determination, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Have you gotten a second opinion?" she asked. "What's the point?" Marcus pulled away from her touch, immediately missing its warmth. "Money can't buy everything, Amara. Sometimes even billionaires just die." "Don't talk like that." There was steel in her voice now, a strength that surprised him. "You don't get to give up. Not yet." Marcus almost smiled despite his despair. Here was Amara, 28 years old, and earning a fraction of his wealth, telling him what he could and couldn't do. Anyone else who dared speak to him that way would find themselves escorted from the building by security. But Amara wasn't anyone else. She was the woman who had quietly become the brightest part of his days, who somehow saw past his fearsome reputation to whatever remained of his humanity. If she wanted to fight for him, maybe there was still something worth fighting for. "Why do you care?" he asked. "I've never been anything but your employer." Amara was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those penetrating dark eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because my mother told me something once. She said that when someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that can never be repaid. And you saved our lives, Mr. Whitmore. Mine and my mother's." Marcus frowned. "I don't understand. 15 years ago, when you first hired my mother, we were living in our car. My father had died, we'd lost our apartment, and I was sick with pneumonia. We had nowhere else to go." Amara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You didn't just give her a job. You paid for my medical treatment, helped us find housing, made sure I could finish school. You saved us, and you never asked for anything in return." The memory hit Marcus like a physical blow. He remembered Sarah's first day of work, remembered the quiet desperation in her eyes as she explained her situation. He had been drowning in his own grief at the time, barely functional after losing Elena and the girls. Helping Sarah and her daughter had been an impulse, a moment of empathy in an otherwise dark period. He had forgotten about it almost immediately, too consumed by his own pain to think about the impact of his actions. But, clearly, Amara had never forgotten. "You were just a child," he said softly. "I was 13, old enough to understand kindness when I saw it." Amara stepped closer again, her voice growing stronger. "So no, you're not just my employer. You're the man who gave me a future when I had none. And I'll be damned if I let you face this alone." Marcus stared at her, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't just Sarah's daughter or his efficient assistant. This was a woman who had been shaped by his long-forgotten act of compassion, who had grown into someone capable of offering that same compassion back to him when he needed it most. The irony wasn't lost on him. For 15 years, he had believed himself utterly alone, convinced that his wealth and power had isolated him from genuine human connection. But Amara had been there all along, a living reminder that kindness could echo across decades, that sometimes the smallest gestures created the deepest bonds. "I don't know how to not be alone," he admitted. Amara reached for his hands, her fingers intertwining with his. Her touch was warm and real, anchoring him to something beyond his fear and despair. "Then, let me teach you," she said. "Let me help you fight this. Let me be here for you the way you were there for us." Marcus looked down at their joined hands, dark and light intertwined. He thought of the medical report on his desk, of the death sentence it represented. He thought of the empty years behind him and the uncertain months ahead. Then, he thought of Amara's gentle fingers wiping away his tears, of her refusal to let him suffer alone, of the possibility that maybe, even now, it wasn't too late for connection. For the first time in hours, Marcus felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope exactly, not yet. But it was the beginning of hope, the first crack in the wall of isolation he had built around himself. "Okay," he whispered. Amara smiled, and Marcus realized he had never really noticed how the next morning arrived gray and cold. But Marcus woke with more clarity than he had felt in years. Amara's promise to stand by him had worked some kind of magic during the night, transforming his despair into something resembling determination. He found himself actually looking forward to seeing her again, to continuing the conversation that had changed everything. His penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park, its minimalist design reflecting the emotional emptiness he had cultivated for so long. Everything was expensive and perfectly arranged, but nothing felt like home. As Marcus dressed for work, he caught sight of himself in the bathroom mirror and paused. When had he become so cold-looking? His gray eyes, once warm with laughter when Elena was alive, had taken on the hard glint of polished steel. His face, though still handsome, carried lines of constant tension. Even his posture spoke of a man perpetually braced for battle. But this morning, something was different. The haunted look that had followed him since his diagnosis seemed softer somehow, as if Amara's gentle touch had begun melting years of accumulated ice. Marcus arrived at his office earlier than usual, hoping to catch a few minutes with Amara before the day's chaos began. He found her already at her desk in the outer office, efficiently sorting through his correspondence. She looked up when he entered, and her smile sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. How did you sleep?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, reminded Marcus how long it had been since anyone cared about such basic aspects of his well-being. "Better than expected," he admitted. "I'm glad." Amara stood, smoothing her navy dress. "I've rescheduled your morning meetings. We have an appointment at Johns Hopkins at 11. Marcus blinked in surprise. "Amara, I told you. You told me money can't buy everything, and you're right. But it can buy the best medical opinions available." Her voice carried gentle steel. "Dr. Elizabeth Chun is one of the world's leading neurosurgeons. She's agreed to review your case personally." Marcus felt a familiar flutter of panic. The diagnosis was clear. There's always a point in fighting. Amara moved closer, her dark eyes intense with conviction. "Promise me you'll see her. Promise me you won't give up without exploring every option." Looking into her face, Marcus realized he would promise her almost anything. The depth of her caring seemed to reach into parts of him he had thought permanently frozen. He nodded slowly. "All right. Johns Hopkins it is." The relief in Amara's expression made his acquiescence worthwhile. She had clearly spent much of the night researching his condition, reaching out to contacts, using his name and resources to secure appointments that would normally take months to arrange. The thought of her losing sleep on his behalf created an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. The drive to Baltimore passed in comfortable conversation. Amara had insisted on accompanying him, claiming she needed to understand his condition fully to provide proper support. Marcus found himself talking more openly than he had in years, sharing memories of Elena and the girls that he had locked away after the accident. "Elena would have liked you," he said as they passed through the Maryland countryside. "She always said the best people were the ones who led with their hearts." Amara turned from the passenger seat to study his profile. "Tell me about her." Marcus had avoided talking about his wife for 15 years, but somehow the words came easily now. "She was a teacher. 2nd grade. She used to say that if you could capture a 7-year-old's imagination, you could change the world." He smiled at the memory. The twins got her creativity. Sophie wanted to be an artist, and Emma was convinced she could talk to animals. "They sound wonderful." They were everything. Marcus's voice caught slightly. "Losing them, it broke something in me that I never bothered to fix. I told myself it was better to feel nothing than to risk that kind of pain again." "But you didn't feel nothing," Amara said softly. "You felt everything. You just buried it so deep that it turned into something else." Her insight was unsettling in its accuracy. Marcus had spent 15 years telling himself he had moved beyond grief, that his emotional numbness was a sign of strength. But Amara was right. The pain had never gone away. It had simply transformed into the cold fury that drove his business dealings, the ruthless efficiency that kept him from forming new attachments. Dr. Chin's office was nothing like Marcus expected. Instead of the sterile, intimidating environment he had imagined, it was warm and welcoming, filled with plants and comfortable seating. The doctor herself was a petite woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an aura of quiet competence. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for coming. I've reviewed your scans and the initial pathology report." Dr. Chin gestured for them to sit. "I won't lie to you. This is a serious situation. But I'm not ready to accept a terminal diagnosis just yet." Marcus felt Amara's hand slip into his, her fingers providing an anchor as Dr. Chun explained the complexities of his condition. The tumor was indeed aggressive and located in a challenging position, but recent advances in surgical techniques and targeted therapies offered possibilities that hadn't existed even 5 years ago. "The surgery would be extremely risky," Dr. Chun continued. "But you're in excellent physical condition otherwise, and the tumor's specific location means we might be able to remove more of it than your initial doctors believed possible." "What are the odds?" Marcus asked. "Honestly, 50-50 for the surgery itself. If successful, combined with aggressive treatment, we might be looking at years rather than months. But there's also a significant chance of serious complications, paralysis, cognitive impairment, or worse. The easiest thing would have been to surrender, to let social services take me and try to start over somewhere else." Amara's fingers traced patterns on the car window. But she didn't. She fought for us, for our future, even when she couldn't see how it would work out. Marcus glanced at her profile, beginning to understand. She took that job with you even though she was terrified. A grieving billionaire with a reputation for destroying anyone who disappointed him? Most people would have run. But she saw something in you, some flicker of the man you used to be. And she bet our entire future on that instinct. She was taking care of a broken stranger's house, Marcus said. That hardly seems like a foundation for hope. Wasn't it, though? Amara turned to face him fully. You gave us everything we needed to build a real life. I graduated from Columbia because you made it possible. I have a career, a future, a sense of security I never could have imagined. All because my mother had the courage to take a chance on someone everyone else had written off. The parallel was impossible to miss. Just as Sarah had taken a risk on a damaged man who seemed beyond help, Amara was asking him to take a risk on himself, to believe that some version of the man he used to be was worth fighting for. The surgery could leave me as damaged as I was emotionally, Marcus said quietly. Maybe, but it could also give you a chance to become something more than you've been. Either way, you won't face it alone. When they arrived back at the office, Marcus found his usual routine disrupted by an unexpected sense of possibility. He moved through his afternoon meetings with only half his attention, his mind returning again and again to Dr. Chen's words and Amara's quiet faith in him. It was nearly 7 when he finally finished his last conference call. Amara appeared in his doorway with dinner and her usual gentle smile. But Marcus barely noticed the food. I've been thinking about what you said, he began without preamble. About taking chances on people everyone else has written off. Amara set down the tray and gave him her full attention. 15 years ago, I hired your mother because something about her reminded me of Elena. The same quiet strength, the same determination to protect what mattered most. Marcus stood and moved to his window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. I had forgotten that. Forgotten why I made that choice. You made it because you recognized something worth saving, Amara said softly. Yes, just like you're doing now. Marcus turned to face her. I want to schedule the surgery. Amara's face lit up with a mixture of relief and determination that took his breath away. She crossed the room in quick strides and, without hesitation, wrapped her arms around him in a fierce hug. Marcus stiffened for a moment, overwhelmed by the sudden contact. No one had held him since Elena's death. But Amara's embrace felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. He allowed his arms to come up around her, holding her close as he breathed in the subtle scent of her perfume. The weeks leading up to Marcus's surgery passed in a blur of medical preparations and unexpected intimacy. Amara had seamlessly transitioned from assistant to caregiver, managing his preoperative appointments while somehow making each day feel less like a countdown to potential doom and more like a rediscovery of what it meant to be alive. She had moved into the guest wing of his penthouse apartment, ostensibly to be available for medical emergencies, but really because neither of them could bear the thought of separation. Marcus told himself it was practical. He needed someone nearby in case of complications from his condition. But the truth was simpler and more frightening. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't lonely. Amara's presence transformed his sterile living space into something approaching a home. She filled vases with fresh flowers, left books in cozy reading nooks, and somehow convinced him to join her for meals at the dining table instead of eating alone in his study. Small changes, but they created an atmosphere of warmth that Marcus had thought was lost to him forever. The business world, however, was beginning to take notice of the changes in Marcus Whitmore. His usual ruthless efficiency had softened into something more collaborative. He found himself actually listening to his employees' concerns, considering their input instead of simply imposing his will. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to those who worked closely with him. You seem different lately, Marcus, his longtime business partner, Richard Chun, mentioned during a board meeting. Almost human. The comment was meant as a joke, but Marcus caught the underlying concern. Richard and the other board members had built their careers around Marcus's predictable personality, brilliant, driven, and completely without sentiment. A Marcus Whitmore who showed signs of emotional complexity was a variable they hadn't planned for. I'm simply exploring more efficient management techniques, Marcus replied coolly, but he could see the skepticism in their eyes. After the meeting, Marcus returned to his office to find Amara reviewing his surgery checklist. She looked up as he entered, immediately sensing his tension. Rough meeting. Marcus loosened his tie and sank into the chair across from her. They think I'm going soft. Are you? The direct question caught him off guard. Amara had a way of cutting through his defenses with surgical precision, forcing him to confront truths he would rather avoid. Maybe, he admitted. Facing your own mortality has a way of clarifying what actually matters. Amara set aside her papers and gave him her full attention. And what matters? Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. She had abandoned her usual business attire for a soft sweater that brought out the golden undertones in her dark skin. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of being pulled back in its usual professional style. She looked younger, more relaxed, more beautiful than he had ever seen her. You matter, he said quietly. The words hung between them like a confession. Marcus had been carefully avoiding this moment, this acknowledgement of what was growing between them. But, with surgery looming and his future uncertain, pretense seemed pointless. Amara's breath caught. Marcus, I know what you're thinking, he said quickly. I'm your employer. You're Sarah's daughter. I'm 20 years older than you. The timing is impossible. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. But none of that changes the fact that you've become the most important person in my life. Amara was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You matter to me too, more than I should probably admit. The admission sent a jolt through Marcus's chest. He had hoped, but hadn't dared to believe that his feelings might be reciprocated. The knowledge that Amara cared for him as more than just an employer or a patient changed everything. What are we doing? He asked. I don't know, Amara admitted. But I know I don't want to stop. Marcus stood and crossed to where she sat, his heart hammering against his ribs. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. Her fingers intertwined with his, warm and steady. After the surgery, he said, if I survive it, if I'm still myself, you'll survive it, Amara interrupted fiercely. And you'll still be yourself. Maybe even more yourself than you've been in years. Marcus hoped she was right, but doubt gnawed at him. Brain surgery carried so many risks beyond simple death. He could wake up a different person entirely, damaged in ways that would make any relationship impossible. The thought of becoming a burden to Amara, of watching her care for him out of obligation rather than love, was almost worse than the prospect of dying. Promise me something, he said. If the surgery goes badly, if I can't be the man you deserve, don't sacrifice your life trying to take care of me. Amara's eyes flashed with anger. Don't talk like that. I'm serious, Amara. You're 28 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. I won't have you throwing it away on what? On someone I care about. Amara stood, her voice rising. Do you think so little of me that you believe I'd only stay out of pity? Marcus was taken aback by her vehemence. That's not what I meant, isn't it? You're so convinced that no one could actually love you for yourself that you're already planning my escape route. Amara stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Well, here's something you need to understand, Marcus Whitmore. I'm not going anywhere. Surgery or no surgery, complications or no complications, I'm going to be right here. The strength of her conviction was overwhelming. Marcus had spent 15 years believing himself fundamentally unlovable, convinced that his wealth was the only thing that made him tolerable to others. But Amara was looking at him with such fierce devotion that he almost believed she could love him despite everything. His age, his reputation, his uncertain future. Why, he asked. Because somewhere along the way, taking care of you stopped being a job and started being a choice. Because you make me laugh when I least expect it. Because you see things about business and life that no one else sees. And you share those insights with me like they actually matter. Amara's voice softened. Because when you look at me, I feel like the most important person in the room. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the softness of her skin. You are the most important person in every room. When he kissed her, it felt like coming alive after years of merely existing. Amara melted into his arms, her lips soft and responsive against his. Marcus had almost forgotten what it felt like to hold someone who wanted to be held, to touch someone who welcomed his touch. The kiss deepened, and Marcus lost himself in the warmth of her response. For precious moments, there was no surgery to fear, no uncertain future to worry about. There was only Amara, solid and real in his arms, kissing him back with a passion that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Amara rested her forehead against his, her hands fisted in his shirt. "The timing is still terrible," she whispered. "The timing has always been terrible for everything important in my life," Marcus replied. "Elena and I met during my company's worst financial crisis. The twins were born during a hostile takeover attempt. Sometimes you can't wait for perfect circumstances." Amara smiled, the expression lighting up her entire face. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if I survive this surgery, I want to see where this goes. I want to stop pretending that what's between us is just professional courtesy." Marcus's voice grew serious. "But I'm also saying that the world isn't going to make it easy for us." He was thinking of the reaction his relationship with Amara would provoke. A billionaire and his housekeeper's daughter, the tabloids would have a field day. His board would question his judgment. Society would whisper about gold diggers and midlife crises. But more troubling were the deeper implications. Marcus was white, Amara was black. In his rarefied social circle, interracial relationships were still met with subtle but persistent discrimination. Amara would face scrutiny and prejudice that she didn't deserve, simply for choosing to be with him. "I know what you're worried about," Amara said, reading his expression. "The age difference, the racial dynamics, the class issues. Trust me, I've thought about all of it. And I've decided that other people's opinions aren't more important than my own happiness. Or yours." Amara's voice was steady, determined. "I'm not saying it will be easy. But I'm not walking away from something real just because it's complicated." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Amara had grown up understanding the realities of prejudice and inequality in ways he never would. If she was willing to face the challenges their relationship would bring, he could find the strength to do the same. "There's something else," Marcus said. "If we do this, if we become whatever we're becoming, I want to do it right. No hiding, no shame. I want everyone to know that you're not just someone I'm seeing. You're someone I'm serious about." Amara's eyes widened slightly. "Marcus, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You deserve better than being treated like a secret. You deserve to be celebrated, not hidden away." Marcus's jaw set with familiar determination. "Let them whisper. Let them disapprove. I've never given a damn what society thinks of my business decisions, and I'm not going to start caring now when it comes to my personal life." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Amara's heart race. She had spent her life being strong, being independent, taking care of herself and her mother. The idea of having someone who wanted to shield her from the world's judgment was both thrilling and slightly terrifying. "What about your business? Your reputation?" "We'll survive," Marcus said firmly. "My company's success isn't built on my personal popularity. And anyone who has a problem with my choice in partners isn't someone I want as a business associate anyway." Amara studied his face, seeing the resolve there. This wasn't an impulsive decision born of fear about his surgery. This was Marcus Whitmore making a calculated choice about what he wanted his life to look like, and choosing her despite all the obstacles. "Okay," she said finally. "But I have one condition." "Anything. We take this one day at a time. Surgery first, recovery second, everything else after that. I don't want you making promises about the future that you might not be able to keep." Marcus nodded, understanding her caution. The surgery was still a massive unknown. He might not survive it, or he might survive, but be so changed that their relationship became impossible. Amara was protecting both of them by insisting on realistic expectations. "One day at a time," he agreed. That night, they had dinner together in Marcus's dining room. But the conversation was different from their previous meals. The professional distance that had always existed between them had evaporated, replaced by the tentative intimacy of two people discovering each other. Amara told him about her childhood, about the challenges of growing up in a single-parent household, about her dreams of starting her own business someday. Marcus shared memories of building his company, of the early days when failure seemed more likely than success. I used to work 18-hour days, he said over dessert. I told myself it was necessary, that I had to prove I could succeed despite everything I'd lost. But, really, I think I was just afraid to go home to an empty apartment. You don't have to be afraid of that anymore, Amara said softly. Marcus reached across the table for her hand. No, I suppose I don't. Later, as they prepared for bed in their separate rooms, Marcus felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, more pre-surgical appointments, more worried looks from his business associates, more reminders of the uncertain future that lay ahead. But, tonight, he wasn't facing those challenges alone. Tonight, he had Amara's laughter echoing in his dining room, her gentle presence filling the empty spaces in his home. Whatever tomorrow brought, at least he would face it as a man who had rediscovered his capacity for love. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus's last conscious thought was of Amara's promise. I'm going to be right here. For the first time since his diagnosis, that seemed like enough. We'll get through this, she whispered against his shoulder. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Marcus closed his eyes, letting himself absorb the comfort of her touch, the strength of her conviction. For the first time in 15 years, he felt like he might actually have something worth fighting for. But, even as he held her, a small voice in the back of his mind wondered what would happen when the rest of the world discovered that the Ice King of Wall Street had found his humanity again, and that he had found it in the arms of his housekeeper's daughter. The thought should have worried him. His board of directors, his business associates, his entire carefully constructed public image, all of it would be threatened by any sign of weakness, any suggestion that Marcus Whitmore was capable of genuine human connection. Instead, as he held Amara close and felt her heart beating against his chest, Marcus found he didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. For the first time in 15 years, he had someone who saw him as more than just a force of nature in an expensive suit. And if that meant everything else had to change, so be it. Beautiful she was when she smiled. It transformed her entire face, lit her eyes from within, made him understand why people talked about the power of human warmth. Okay, she repeated. We'll figure this out together. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but Marcus no longer felt like he was drowning in it. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't facing his troubles alone. And for the first time since receiving his diagnosis, he began to believe that maybe 6 months could be enough time to learn how to truly live.